In this podcast, we pick the bones of another poor week for Boro, in which defeat to Coventry mounts even more pressure on Chris Wilder. This is the Boro Breakdown podcast, and this is all your Boro Matchday chatter in a pod.
Wants support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Janino wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome back to the Boro Breakdown podcast, where the podcast that gives you all of your Boro Matchday chatter in a pod. And we lost again. It's now 11 league games played, 2 wins, 4 draws and 5 defeats, making it Boro's worst start to a season outside of the top flight. Now, before we get into that, I do want to let everybody know why we've gone blue this month. It is our MNDA Awareness Month. We are raising money and funds for our chosen charity, the Motor Neuron Disease Association. October is a really difficult month for me. It's when my mum sadly passed away. I know she'd probably hate me for mentioning that on the podcast. She'd probably say, shut up, Dana, get on with it. But if anybody could give any money, the link is www.justgiving.com/the Boro Breakdown MND. So, Tom, where do we even begin? 3 words. I'll start off with that. We obviously asked the listeners as well what their 3 words are. I'm going to read out a few. Paul said deflated, uninspired, broken. Simon said it's getting worse. Liam said we look lost. And Jonathan, difficult to watch. Tom, tell me your 3 words.
Oh, man, apathy creeping in. And I feel like I'm going to be disappointing a few people in our Telegram chat today who expected me to just be really angry and kind of go off on one. But I'm not even angry anymore, just disappointed. I knew exactly what was gonna happen yesterday. See, I went, so kind of all the way up to Saturday. It was in the back of my mind that I'd be going, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to a match on Saturday. It's just like I forget about it, and then oh yeah, I'm going to a match on Saturday. And it I don't want anyone to kind of get the wrong impression that like, oh, as soon as we start losing, I'm kind of like not bothered or anything like that. It's just, you know exactly what's going to happen. Like, thinking forward to that day, I just thought, you know, it'll be a good day up until the football starts. I'll have a good laugh with the lads I'm going with. We'll have a drink before the match and stuff. That's the bit you look forward to. And then you actually go to the stadium and watch it, and it's just the same stuff over and over again, the same mistakes. Like, you know exactly what we're going to do. We'll either make a mistake and concede, and then rally back, and it'll be the hope that kills you in the second half. That you think, oh well, maybe we might get an equaliser. We actually started to attack now, but we should have been doing that for the whole game. And then all the attacks are exactly the same as well. They'll go down either wing, go across the face of the goal, no one will be there, or it gets cut out easily by their defence. It's just we've become so predictable. Just every match day seems the same now, and literally the only good part of it is before the match, and then it's somehow double the length of the journey home for an away day or even a home match because you get stuck in traffic. Than it is actually going to the ground. Yeah, it's just not a good time to be a Boro fan at the moment, I think.
Yeah, definitely not. I think something's got to give because, listen, it was so poor yesterday, and I was really hoping that after the international break, we would sort out the problems that we've seen so far this season. And going to Coventry, I said to you, I felt really unasked about that game because I felt like, the international break, I think I do disconnect from football a little bit, but obviously going into that international break off the back of those 2 really disappointing results against Cardiff and Rotherham, I checked out a little bit, admittedly, and picking back up from there, I just really wanted to see Boro win and improve, an improvement in that performance, and we didn't see it. I saw little to no improvement from the Rotherham game, and something has got to change, because I do and have believed in Chris Wilder, but I said in the last podcast that if we don't win, more question marks will start to crop up, and even more question marks cropped up after that game yesterday. And I remember we recorded after Coventry last season, and it was a very critical podcast of ours, and a few people said, like, a little bit negative there, guys, and completely understandable. It was probably the point in which I thought, is Warnock really the right man for this job? And I don't really want to be as critical in this podcast as I was in the last one, but it does kind of feel like a little bit of deja vu, because Boro are very much stuck in the mud. We don't look like a team. There's no joint up thinking. The combination play is just really bizarre in that it's not functional. It looks really tired. Simple passes are going astray, and I just don't understand really what we're seeing. I'm very lost, and I feel like this team is very lost as well. But let's get fully into it, because Victor Gyökeres, of course, scored the only goal of the game, which gave Coventry their first 3 points of the season. So very generous from Boro there. Tom, as you mentioned, you were there. I was there as well. We both were, unfortunately. What did you make of the performance?
I just thought it was poor. And it's like I said earlier, you knew exactly what was going to happen. It was the same as the other away game I've been to in Reading. And I get the impression that the Cardiff game was quite similar to the QPR game, especially in terms of scoreline. And it just seemed very much the same with this one. I thought it was a fairly poor goal to concede, just because of, giving them it back off a throw in, and then it's just like it's a proper FIFA ball over the top to a player with more pace than the defender, and there's only kind of one outcome from that point. And then we just didn't do enough after that. Like, you can't carry on only turning up for one half of a football match and thinking that you're going to win it. And I mean, we did look a lot more positive after the second half. I mean, Coventry, I don't feel like they had to do much second half other than defend and occasionally hit us on the break, which, it still looked dangerous every time that they did that, because, Gyökeres was having an absolute field day against our defenders, which I've been saying was going to happen all week. I should have bet on it, because I've been sat there at work all week and people have been coming to talk to me about, you're going to Coventry on Saturday, aren't you? I was just like, yeah, Gyökeres is going to have an absolute field day.
We saw him, actually. As the coach was coming in, we saw him. He was like signing loads of Coventry fans' shirts and things like that. And I just stared at him. I was like, he's definitely scoring today. It just felt so inevitable, like football narrative and everything. He was somebody that Chris Wilder was interested in the summer. It just felt so predictable, inevitable that it was going to happen. And obviously it did. But I agree with you. He bullied our defence, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dale Fry, I think, can stand up against most, very good strikers. And, he did that against Kane and Ronaldo last season, did really well. And then he really kind of struggled against Lukaku. And I feel like it was very, very similar, but not as one-sided with Gyökeres. I feel like Gyökeres has that strength, and the other thing is the pace, which hurt us as well. Our defence just didn't look up to that challenge. I don't feel like we handled him that well, and probably. It's probably because of the way we play, by having such a kind of high line. There's so much in space and behind for him to run into if he can get past the defender, which he was doing the majority of the time. I think the defence obviously did the best that they could in trying to keep him out wide and keep him to kind of like non-threatening areas, but then he still got it in his locker to run across the face of the box and keep hold of the ball. So yeah, it was a very, very difficult game in terms of containing him, but I think most of the team were just poor yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't understand what I was watching, to be honest. As I said at the top of the show, I was really hoping there would be some improvement, and we just looked really flat and disjointed. And the midfield, again, so problematic. There's just no movement. There was no... They did not look on the same wavelength. We couldn't string 2 or 3 passes together because it would constantly be played wide of a player or played behind them. And I think being in that... I mean, the atmosphere was flat in the away end. I was really surprised at just how kind of disconnected the support was. Red Faction were there trying to get things going, but it just wasn't really... It didn't manifest into a good atmosphere because, and I do think that when the atmosphere is like that, it's because of what we're seeing on the pitch, and what we saw on the pitch yesterday was just really, really disappointing. And I mean, you said there about the high line, it's always going to be an issue of that setup, and it's the risk that you're willing to take, but we have to be good in possession, and we're just not. This season it's been a theme where we are so sloppy with the ball, and Crooks and Howson were incredibly poor with it yesterday. Moore, I do have to ask the question of what he offers, because I do think he started really well, but he's just completely... he's incognito now. He's anonymous. I don't know what good he brings to the side, to be honest. I know that sounds harsh, but I haven't seen anything from him since his second game or so. Just so poor, and I'm so numbed to everything that's going on right now, because I just don't understand what this team is doing. As I said at the beginning, the worst league start outside of the top flight ever. It's incredibly poor, and for the manager that we have at Chris Wilder, you would not expect it. But Wilder made changes. He brought in Smith, Bowler and Moore for Jones, Giles and McGree. He said after the game about the wing-back changes, we thought that the right way to go about it was to come here, be nice and strong and solid, and get a foothold in the game. Especially with our current away record, we needed to do something, knowing that after 60 minutes, if we needed to take the game away from the opposition, we had those two to come on. It was bold from Wilder, Tom, and you did say that if now isn't the time to play Tommy Smith, you don't know when will be. It didn't pay off, but what did you think of those changes?
I think Wilder was definitely listening to our last podcast if Smith got the start, but I understood the Smith in for Jones change. I didn't understand Bowler in for Giles. I just feel like Giles is where most of our attacking threat has actually came from this year. So I thought if he's going Smith and Bowler, he might be going thinking them two have a little bit more in terms of defensive qualities than Giles and Jones, which I can understand. But I did hear a lot of kind of the I think you mentioned it the last podcast, the kind of misunderstanding about Tommy Smith, where people think he's just like a right back, and they don't realise that he's up there with Jones in terms of chance creation numbers for last season. So I was like, we're still going to have a threat going forward. I think Smith and Bowler are still fairly threatening going forward in terms of their chance creation, but they just don't create as much as Giles in particular, but also Jones. That being said, I do still think it was a good idea to change Jones out, because I just feel like he hasn't been looking like himself for the last few games. He came on as a sub yesterday and then seemed back to it. He was running at players again. And for me, Jones has two main strengths. It's running at players and that low ball across the box. And he just seemed a little bit more free to run at players yesterday when he came on off the bench. So, I mean, it's a shame he's out for the next match because of his suspension. But if he'd got back to that form and kind of remembered what he's supposed to do in those positions, then hopefully that 60 minutes or whatever it was on the bench has probably served him quite well. Also, McGree in for Morton, Morton for McGree, I didn't particularly understand too much. I think if he was going for experience and being more kind of solid and stuff, there's maybe an argument to put Morton in, but he has been on poor form the last few games. And I think it's been kind of really well identified recently that we don't have anyone who can bring the ball and out from midfield and be progressive, which McGree can do. So it seemed to me like McGree should have been in from the start yesterday instead of Mort as well.
The Giles thing was so weird because Johnny said in the group chat, "Thank God I'm not there because of the team." And I looked at it and I thought, what is Wilder doing here? It was really bold. And of course, if we'd have got the win, it would have paid off and we would have lauded the tactical masterclass, if you will, of Wilder. But you take out Giles, and this is no slant on Mark Bowler, because literally anybody that comes in place of Ryan Giles is going to be immediately inferior to him. His deliveries are fantastic. Yes, defensively, he might not be great, but there's a big conversation around Trent at Liverpool right now. It's just the risk that you take when you're a wing back in a possession dominant system. As I've mentioned so many times, Boro aren't using the ball well enough, and that's why we keep getting hit with that long ball in behind. But you take Giles out of the team, you're taking out a lot of Boro's creativity, and we lacked that in that first half. Bowler kept putting balls down the line into the channel, and there was nobody there. And that's where I was thinking, right, more get into those positions that Crooks usually occupies in those half spaces, but he just wasn't. And I feel like that could either be a tactical decision from Wilder. He did mention in those quotes that I read out there that he wanted to be a little bit more defensively solid, or it could just be Alex Moore deciding to stay back himself, not take the risk, not offer himself up for the ball. I feel like it's more the former than the latter, and Wilder did say to more like, tuck in and stay there just in case we do get hit on the counter-attack. But then that meant that nobody was down that channel. And in the build-up to the goal that we conceded, Bowler just kicked it down the line and it went straight out, play for a throw-in. And I just turned around to my dad and I just shook my head in absolute utter disbelief. And then the next thing you know, we've got a throw-in and we've left it, or we've lost the ball and they score. But it just, you think about those situations, the ball down the channel, if Moat's not going to go there in those half spaces, then a Duncan Watmore should be there. There was a complete disconnect of that left-hand side. And then when Giles came on, it was a big boost because, of course, he's one of the best wing-backs in the league. He's going to give you that creativity. But then it just petered out. The second half was better than the first, but it wasn't great. We had that 10-minute spell where I think that those changes did give us a lift. I think the crowd lifted as well. But it didn't really, it didn't transpire to anything, because at the end of the day, Boro are poor in midfield. We seem to be vulnerable defensively. And then up front, it was like pulling teeth to try to get an opportunity. So it was just, I think that size says all, to be honest. But we talk about Tommy Smith there. How did you think he fared? That was his first start for Boro. I
didn't think you did too badly. I mean, that is in kind of the greater scheme of saying, everyone in the squad was poor. But I don't think he stood out as being like the most poor there, or like he didn't belong in that position or anything like that. You could tell he will offer something in that position, and he obviously does know how to play there, and he's got ability. It's just no one looked good in that game, so I can't really say that he's going to be like top competition for Jones. He's going to replicate those numbers from last season or anything like that, because as we're playing at the moment, no one's going to do that. But like I say, he didn't stand out as being exceptionally poor or anything like that. He did seem like he belonged in the team. It was just poor all around.
It didn't really help that Crooks could not pass a simple ball, to be fair.
Yeah, there was that, and also his first touch was very much like a trampoline. Yesterday, I said in the Telegram chat, it was just all over the place. So I feel like even any decent passes that Smith might have played into Crooks, wouldn't have actually resulted in anything anyway, because he'd have had to make up about another 5 yards to recover the ball. But yeah, he wasn't really helped on that right-hand side. I think in the first half, if I'm remembering right, he did play a few kind of like hopeful balls down the channel for Watmore to run onto. And Watmore looked fairly dangerous from the vantage point of being at the other end of the stadium. You get your hopes up and you're just like, oh, maybe he's going to like take everyone on here. And he did run at people and get the ball, but get the ball from Smith's balls down the channels, but obviously he didn't actually do anything in the end. So I'd probably give him like a 5 out of 10 debut for us, but by no means the worst player there, but no one was good.
Well, we did get caught out by a ball in behind. The goal that we conceded, I was fuming. If there was a Dana cam in that stadium, which I'm really glad there isn't, because I did nothing throughout that game apart from just whinge at that goal, then you would see all my gesticulating. A throw-in, Tom. It was a throw-in from us that ends up in a goal. It literally 12 seconds between Matt Bowler taking the throw-in, and Victor Gyökeres scoring. 12 seconds. It was absolutely ridiculous. And this happens quite frequently with Boro. You see there, he's literally in line with the edge of the 18-yard box. And yet somehow it's a really poor ball from Matt Clark back to Bowler. Again, talking about that disconnect on that left-hand side. There was just that really simple pass that was a theme throughout the entire game. We just could not play it properly. And then all of a sudden you've got Fancati's elbow, who I'm a massive fan of, by the way, their right wing back. Plays the ball down the line. All of a sudden, Victor Gyökeres through on goal. Of course, there was only going to be one outcome. 1-on-1 with Zach Steffen, plays it through his legs into the back of the net. And I was absolutely furious because in no way, shape or form should Boro be conceding an attack from a throw-in that is well in the opposition's third. That should have been, talking about percentages, there's more likely a chance of that ending up in a Middlesbrough opportunity than a Coventry opportunity. And yet somehow it's so simple the way that we get caught in behind because we commit so many players up the pitch. It's that risk that you take that just backfired completely. And Wilder did mention that Dijksteel stepped up. There's no angle or viewpoint that we can see the defensive line, unfortunately, but I was absolutely furious with that goal. I just don't understand how we can concede from a throw-in. It absolutely baffles me. And that was what decided the game in the end. From a throw-in, I properly don't understand it. What was your thoughts on the goal?
Well, poor. I've just been thinking through all that. Coventry weren't exactly great yesterday either. And I feel like if they don't have Gyökeres, that game ends up 0-0 and no one's happy. Yeah, just very poor. I couldn't remember kind of from watching the game yesterday how far down the line that throw-in actually was. To me, in my memory, it was a lot further towards the halfway line than that. But seeing that again, good grief, 18-yard box, it's so easy. You just take a short throw and keep possession of the ball and try and fashion out a chance from there. We usually do with throw-ins around that area. It'd be Jones or Giles throwing it in. McGree or Crooks will take a pass or maybe a touch in Crooks's case, and it'll go back to the throw-in taker. Then you can try and get a cross in. But I just don't understand how you can give the ball away in that area and have so many people up the pitch where it's that simple for Gyökeres to run through and score. And just to top it all off, going through Steffen's legs as well. Big God, that's the worst thing possible as a goalkeeper. It's not quite Joe Lumley against Barnsley levels, but as someone who quite often plays goalkeeper, if I was Zach Steffen there, I'd be absolutely fuming at that. But to be honest, he had a similar chance, although there was a lot more people there earlier in the game over on the right-hand side, and Steffen made a save one-on-one. So even though he was running through there and I just probably about 60% of me is thinking, yep, this is a goal. There's probably still about 40% going, maybe Bowler or catch him here, or was it Bowler? It was Dijksteel, wasn't it?
It was Dijksteel, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just because he was on the left-hand side. I thought it might have been Bowler running back, but no, it was Dijksteel running back. So it was like maybe he's going to catch him, or maybe Steffen's going to make the save, and it went with the 60% of me being sure that it was going to go in. Just poor goal to concede.
12 seconds. 12 seconds between the throw-in and Victor Gyökeres scoring. And yet you look at Boro and it's like crafting a masterpiece trying to get us to fashion out any sort of opportunity, which is really worrying actually, because I have really liked what Rodrigo Muniz has brought Middlesbrough so far. It's that physicality, and then you've got the tenacity alongside him with Watmore, who I still think should be an impact substitute. I don't understand why he keeps starting, to be honest, when we've got Marcus Forss on the bench. But then I have said that he is an impact player as well, so it's 6 and 2 threes probably. But oh god, it's just so poor. It's just so poor, the way that we are conceding goals at the moment, and the way that we just seem to be struggling to attack. But we will get into a lot more of that later, because I do have a point on that. But Tom, obviously, another really poor result, and especially on the other side of the international break as well, where we would have thought and assumed that there would be improvement. Very much not the case. Has that game changed your opinion on Chris Wilder at all?
A little bit, yeah, and it's changing more with every game that we play, to be honest. I think, like you said, you've been kind of like a big supporter of him when he first came in. I wasn't overly sold straight away. It was only after speaking to you and Johnny where I was like, yeah, fair enough, this might actually be a decent acquisition for us. And then he's proved it by playing, getting the team to play decent football through, the winter last season and probably up until around March-ish time. And that's where we started to go downhill. But it's something ridiculous, like 4 wins in 26 games or something since that point now. And it's getting to be bad. Like I said, you know what the team is going to do every time they turn up, and it's never good football anymore. I don't like the fact that he's coming out and throwing certain players under the bus. I said
just
on the last podcast,
it's always just Dijksteel, really, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah, but I'm sure there's probably been other examples as well. But Dijksteel probably gets the brunt of it, I think. And that last game, I think we spoke about on the last pod where he blamed 8 individual mistakes in the build up the Cardiff goal. Like that is your fault. It's not 8 individual players' faults. It's and you've got 2 weeks over the international break to work on the tactical stuff from the players, it just in case there is that argument that they're taking a while to gel or stuff like that. But like there was still a part of me yesterday that was thinking, you know what, maybe it's like the opposite of what used to happen with Karanka. Maybe we're going to come back after this international break and be absolutely class and win this 3-0. And then it was just more of the same. Like, what were they doing in that 2 weeks? Because it looks like they've had 14 days off. Like, it doesn't look like they've actually done anything. And he just kind of constantly blames individual mistakes. But I feel like it's just how well drilled the squad is, and they're not there yet. I don't feel like... So there's some examples and like players people slate at the moment. Alex Moore being one of them. Alex Moore doesn't become highly rated at Barnsley and Leeds, and then overnight become poor when he goes to West Brom and Boro. Matt Clark doesn't win Player of the Year for the last 3 seasons at his last 2 clubs, and then become poor overnight when he comes to Boro. I had another example as well. I can't think off the top of my head. Darrell Lenihan doesn't, he's not like Mr. Reliable, Blackburn's captain, and then starts making mistakes overnight just off his own back when he comes to Boro. I don't think this problem is necessarily just on the players. I think it's how well drilled they are, and I just don't get the impression anyone particularly knows what they're doing at the moment, which I really feel comes down to tactics.
I've started thinking recently that we need a massive change in them, because Wilder's tactics are not new anymore. The overlapping centre-half business was fantastic when it was introduced in his Sheffield United team, and it was very much innovative. And almost groundbreaking, if you will. I mean, I'm pretty sure there'll be some Dutch team or Dutch manager that explored that before Wilder did, but certainly in England, it felt like that was very much a new thing. And yet it isn't anymore. We have seen it against us. We saw it against Sheffield United. Paul Heckingbottom adopts very much similar tactics and methods to Chris Wilder. Perry and G scored a goal against us in which he was the overlapping centre-back. Something needs to change for me. Not drastically, but I think we need new ideas. That doesn't necessarily mean a change in manager, but I think Wilder and Neil have a reputation, or certainly Neil does anyway, of being a great tactician and a great innovator within those tactics. We need something, because in 2022, we are very much a mid-table team. 13th, if you look at the annual table on Transfermarkt, 41 points from 32 games, which is just over 1 point a game. That's not good enough form to get into the top 6, because there are teams that are absolutely flying in the championship. And I do think this championship is just as poor as last season for me in terms of, I guess, the scope of teams that could get into the top 6. And Boro are so far off it at the moment. And you know what? I'm also starting to think that I'm very much still Wilder, and I will reiterate that, mainly because his reputation at Sheffield United is what it is, or was, because of the success that he brought to that football club. I'm hanging on to the hope that he can change things around, because he's done so in the past. However, in the present, it's been poor, and we have to judge it based on what we are seeing. And maybe I'm leaning far too into what he's done in the past, because right now he's not doing it at all. He's not getting us the results. He's not. The football isn't particularly well. It's not swashbuckling as it was last season. It's not particularly great to watch. It's infuriating, actually. And I'm also starting to think that, and this might be controversial, that Wilder just isn't the right fit for Boro. And hear me out here, because with a manager like him, and the success that he's brought to Sheffield United, to Oxford, to Northampton, somebody that got Sheffield United in a very comfortable and established position in the Premier League. They were not that far away from a European position. They were fantastic in that division, the top flight of English football. With a manager like him, there's going to be, quite naturally, an expectation of short to mid-term success. And yet Boro seem to be, anyway, moving in a more long-term direction. And the reason why I think that is because if it was a short to mid-term success, we would have spent 10 million on Strand Larsen. We would have brought in Emil Rees for however much. We would have sort of buckled on the Gyökeres figure and brought him in. Again, last week, I didn't want to say the word disconnect, but maybe people just aren't on the same page, because surely Wilder, and the manager that he is, you would expect as a fan, quite naturally, it breeds that expectation of, okay, we've brought in a manager that has done it before in the Championship, that plays great football, that ideally should probably be in a Premier League job when he took over at Middlesbrough. And yet it's that sort of expectation leveled with, oh, but it's a long-term vision. That doesn't align with me. That doesn't match up with me. You've got a manager there that is successful, and you've got a team that kind of wants to build. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I kind of just feel like it's not aligning at the moment.
Just to kind of add on to that, I was thinking about something similar yesterday. I don't think you signed Zach Steffen as a goalkeeper, as your first choice goalkeeper for Championship season, if the aim isn't playoffs or promotion. Same as I don't think you sign Ryan Giles, who is, I would say, the best left wing back in this division. If you're planning on a long-term vision, you're not planning on getting promoted this season, and you know it's just kind of building blocks towards the future. Because the amount you're paying in wages for those two players, probably Stefan in particular, why would you do that if you were planning on being in this position for another couple of years? I think half of our transfers there have been kind of based around short-term success, and then it doesn't make sense with some of the other ones. Hoppy and Force in particular, like you don't it's clear that we were in need of strikers over the pre-season. So why spend money on 2 strikers, one of whom has played at Championship and Premier League level,
And is an international.
And is a Finnish international, just to say he's a development striker? I don't get that at all. And it's like I said on the last podcast, the whole kind of like Moneyball analogy. I feel like that Kieran Scott and the guys from the club in charge of the transfers had a vision on what they wanted this team to be, which players they would need to get there, which players would fill certain criteria, and they're just not being used. So it's kind of like the analogy of Moneyball there would be kind of like getting rid of some of the players to force the manager into, no pun intended, to making that decision to play them. So I don't get, in terms of our squad building, what we've done here. But I don't think for a second, you know, Wilder was saying a few weeks ago about like he wasn't sure why there were certain expectations and stuff like that. I think the expectations are because of the players that we've signed. Like people go on about like, oh, there's been like no marquee signing and stuff like that. I would argue that like Stefan, Giles, Lenihan, and Clark probably do stand out as absolutely fantastic signings in this division. It's just they're not playing like it at the moment, and like I said earlier, players don't lose that skill overnight. So what have they been doing on the training pitch?
It is a conundrum. Wilder mentioned the away form. We actually have the joint second worst away record in the league so far this season. Just 1 point picked up from 5 games, 1 draw, 4 defeats. You have to go back to Peterborough in April, at the beginning of April last season, for Boro's last victory on the road. So 9 games ago. Tom, why are Boro struggling? And I mean, I could probably finish that a question there, but why are we struggling so much away from home?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say we're just struggling in general, so I don't think it's a problem necessarily limited to when we go on away days, but I don't know. You know, you go into Coventry, they hadn't won all season. I think on the way out from the ground, someone said that's the first home goal they've got all season. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I don't know if it was a Boro fan or a Coventry fan who said that. But it just seems like if you're struggling at home, don't worry because you're playing Boro soon. I don't get it because, like I said earlier, we're just not playing the way we used to when Wilder first came in. We become very predictable, and I feel like at home, I don't know, there maybe just seems that little bit of nervousness from the players. And it could just come down to, you know, not knowing what they're doing tactically, having that, you know, not drilled into them as much, because it was never a problem, say, like our last successful stint under Karanka. I was saying this to one of the guys I went with yesterday, when I used to go watch us when Karanka was manager, it wasn't, are we going to win today? It's like, I wonder how many we're going to win by today. And that was at home. I didn't think we'd ever concede. And I just figured it was always going to be 2 or 3-0. And then away, I never like away games just because I think I listened to most of them around on the radio around that time. And I don't know, there's always something about listening to it on the radio where it's just like, I don't know, it just kind of feels like lack of control.
Yeah.
Even though you're not in control anyway. But like, because you can't see what's going on, it's a little bit more unsettling, like you say.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I feel that completely.
But like, even at that point under Karanka, you just thought, oh, well, it might be like 0-0, or you know, I didn't feel nervous going into any of those games, and now going into it, it's like, shit, are we going to win at the Riverside this week? Like, what about when Birmingham come on Wednesday? Are they going to absolutely batter us in the first half like Cardiff did, or? And then you got Millwall away next Saturday, and it's like, God, tough place to go. That how are the players even going to handle that? Because they just can't seem to handle anything away from home at the moment. It seems like unless I mean, I'm going to use this as an example, but they'd probably beat us, like, unless there's a team that hasn't won since like 1997 or something like that, and haven't scored at home since 1997. There's no reason to go into any away game feeling confident. And like I said, you could go into that game and they'd probably still beat us and get their first goal in, just under 30 years anyway.
Yeah, I do think it's everyone always says a confidence issue, but I do feel like that definitely plays a part, because sure, there'll be a bit of a monkey on the players' backs where it was a problem last season. I remember when we were reviewing or previewing the Preston game, and I sort of was basing my prediction on the game, or my feelings on the game, around our away form, because at that point it wasn't great. And I think you can stretch it further back. We haven't been brilliant since the turn of the year, in general anyway, but especially away from home. And it doesn't feel like the players are confident. It doesn't feel like the players believe in themselves, but they have to believe in themselves because they were good last season. I agree with you. They don't just become poor overnight. Yes, you can have peaks and troughs in performances. Yes, the players get a year older. They can get past their peak, which is individual to each player, by the way. We don't just hit 26 and then they decline, they plateau in footballing ability. But they have to believe in themselves, because they have shown that they can be a fantastic footballing side with great swagger and great confidence. We're not seeing that individually. I think a lot of them are a shadow of themselves. Collectively, and yes, I know we've got a different team in terms of, obviously we've lost players, we brought some in, but collectively we look a shadow of the team from last season as well. Even in the basics, even in the kind of patterns that we know, the combination play on that right-hand side, I think, has been lesser this season than last. It's less of a threat. The midfield is a problem. It's incredibly leaky and porous and poor, and just doesn't have the dynamism or legs. But I'll reiterate it. They can do it. We have seen them do it. They need to believe that they can do it again, because that away form is poor. Our form in 2022 has been poor. They just need that one big Phoenix from the Ashes type win, and then they need to add on it, because it feels like one step forward, two steps back again. But before we go into the praise and place, which admittedly is going to be really difficult this week, I do want to give an extra push for the Football Content Awards. Of course, if you haven't heard already, where have you been? We've pushed it God knows how many times. We are up for a national award in the FCAs. We're down to the final 8 podcasts. We need a little bit more of a push from you guys. If you haven't voted already, to vote. Again, there's many ways that you can do so. The links to those ways to vote will be in the descriptions of the podcast and YouTube as well. You've got until October the 9th. So as we record this Sunday, a week to vote. Please do. It would be absolutely fantastic to bring that award back to Teesside. So thank you to everybody that's voted so far. Keep it going, and hopefully we can get that award brought back here. So Tom, praise in place. Of course, the praise in place is the place where we give praise to a fan, a player, chips and curry. We'll get that in there all the time. Who gets your nomination this week?
It's going to be a very short one this week, but Rodrigo Muniz, again, for the same reason I nominated him last time. He just seems like a workhorse. Like, he's never never gives up. Always battling, always going in for the headers, generally wins a lot of them. Vertical leap's fantastic in that respect. I wish I had it. But
it's that Brazilian spice in him.
But yeah, I just thought yesterday he was probably the only player with kind of any credit for me in terms of never giving up, and felt a little bit bad for him when Coventry's keeper was being a bit of a knob at the end and pushing him against the boards and stuff. I don't know. Jones got absolutely wiped out on the right hand side, and then I think Muniz went to get the ball. I was looking at Jones and I looked back, and them two were arguing, and their keeper was trying to push him over the boards or something, and all the Boro fans around the area were absolutely fuming. I want to go down and just back him up and just. It's all right, Muniz, don't worry. But,
a brawl.
But yeah, like I said, just never stopped working, and I've never seen a game so far where that's been the case. So at the moment on this run of form, I just feel like he's going to be the shoe-in for my praise and place every week because nothing's, like I said, nothing really changes game to game at the moment, and it's only him who's the bright spark. I will say I did think he was a little bit unlucky not to get on the score sheet yesterday. I think the second attempt he had in the first half, again, right down the other end of the ground from me. I've only seen a replay on someone's phone at this point, but it did seem he had more time than he thought he had. But he got a couple of decent shots off in that game. It's just a shame they were both at the keeper, and also just a bit of a shame that they didn't hit the keeper in his face, to be honest, after that injury time fracas.
Go on, Tom. You know what? For me, I'm going to say, I want to say Akpom, because Akpom, when he came on, there was some good link-up play, and I'm not going to say that there was a lot of it, because there wasn't, but there was some good link-up play between him and Muniz and McGree, and I just like Akpom. I like his redemption arc so far. I can't actually believe that we're kind of pinning our hopes on him, considering that he wasn't even training with us in pre-season until the last week. But I think I'm going to say Akpom, and a special mention to the bacon and egg McMuffin that I had just before I went on the coach. So there's that as well.
But we had the 2,500 Boro fans that went down there yesterday into that praise and place as well.
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
be honest,
Train strikes as well. Difficult for them to get down.
Absolutely quality effort from everyone who got there, I think.
Yeah, especially with the football that Boro are serving up so far. But moving on to questions. You can send us your questions in all the ways that you probably should already know now, but if you don't already, it's Twitter at Boro_breakdown, Facebook and Instagram as well, and also via email, the borobreakdown@hotmail.co.uk, or is it .com? No, it's .co.uk. But the first question is from Charlie. He asks, can this midfield issue be solved with the current players in the squad, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm a big believer in that can happen, and players just need to be used correctly. People are probably going to be sick of me talking about it, but going back to the last time we were successful and looking at when Karanka came into the club, turned Emmanuel Ledesma into a player that we ended up building around for about half that season, because he was probably one of our only creative outlets, and he
What
just
a time
made
to
him
be
look,
alive
look
that
so,
was.
so much better. So I've got absolutely no doubt that we're in a much better place in terms of squad quality now than we were at that point. We're not having to play centre midfielders at right back or anything like that, and they're just not playing to their full potential. So I fully believe that we're probably only seeing around 10% of what these players can do at the moment, and it's just about unlocking that extra 90%. I think once we do that, we'll look like a completely different team, and this team does have the ability to do that. It's just for whatever reason now they're not showing it.
The email is theborobreakdown@hotmail.com, not .co.uk. I fumbled the bag there. I apologise. But I think in terms of a midfield solution, it could be a case of dropping 2 6s and an 8 rather than 1 6 and 2 8s. You could have. I really want to see McGree as the number 8, because I do think that he has the ability and potential to be a ball carrier. And when we saw him come on yesterday, I thought he was bright in his passing selection and trying to carve open an opening. I don't like him as a number 10. I think that is a really specialised position that needs a Gaston Ramirez type player. We don't have that, so don't play that. The 2 6s, we have been, as I've said, really porous in midfield. Wilder did go with 2 6s against, was it against Rotherham, where he moved Crooks back. But Crooks has been poor, and the issue with Crooks is he doesn't have any competition apart from potentially McNair, but then McNair came on yesterday as a right-sided centre-back, so it's... do you really want to put McNair in midfield? So for me, I'd probably play Howson as the sort of defensive screen, and then Luongo, I'd actually bring him in as the distributor, because he's somebody that can get his head up and play that quick pass. And then McGree is the 8. But I by no means think that that's a perfect solution. We don't have a great sort of collection of midfield options, to be honest. Certainly the way that they're playing, Moore and Crooks just don't get in the team for me the way that they're playing at the moment. So that's a potential solution in my mind anyway, but I don't think it's perfect by any means. But Carl Watson asks, are we really any further forward than the side that got beat by Coventry 2-0 this time last season, Tom?
Well, yeah, we're 1 goal forward.
Fair enough, small gains.
Yeah, we've been 0-0 next season. But I think in terms of the squad building, I think we're in a much better place than we were last season. As I've just been saying there, I don't think this squad's playing to its full ability at the moment. If there were, I don't think we lose that yesterday. It's just, to quote your 3 words, something's got to give. I think something needs to change. I quite like your suggestion there of playing with 2 sixes. I think we need to see someone like Luongo come into the team, because this current setup's not working, and there's not enough in the midfield at the moment. I think it's either we stick with this system and kind of tweak it a little bit like that, or we just overhaul it and go for a different formation, which, Wilder's done before in previous jobs at Northampton and Oxford. I think he did play 4-2-3-1 at one of them. I don't necessarily think 4 at the back might be the best way to get the best out of the defenders that we've got. But we could go like 5-4-1 and kind of just go like 2 proper fullbacks. I've Bowler and Smith. I'm got no doubt that they'll be able to overlap Giles and Jones, play Giles and Jones a little bit further forward. You've got less coming off the bench in that system, but it might make us a little bit more solid. But I do think that we've recruited better than last year, and we look more like we've got round pegs and round holes than last year, and we filled a lot of the areas we did need to address. It's just the midfield is a massive cause of concern at the moment.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the shortcomings of this team from that last team. Keep mentioning it, but Tav is such a big miss. And I always thought that it would be difficult to replace him. Well, I'll just park that there because I know people are sick of mentioning Tav. I certainly aren't. But Liam asks, what's the difference between Prime, Wilder, Boro, Forest at home on Boxing Day last season, which was a very, very good victory, probably the best performance I've seen of Chris Wilder's Middlesbrough, and the team we've seen today? Is it confidence? Is it players? Or is it the manager?
All of the above for me. I think confidence is a massive factor in it. I think it's on the manager for not having the team drilled as well as they should be. And then also the players, although I said you can't really blame the individual mistakes, they are still the ones making them. So it is on Wilder to get those mistakes out of them and have them drilled, because if they are drilled, they don't make them, or if they do, they probably get dropped in that scenario. But there's too many players making mistakes at the moment. I think it does come down to confidence, in that they might be scared to do certain things in case they've ended up being the cause for a goal, and they're one of the individual mistakes that the manager talks about in post match. And then also one of the main differences, I think, between Boxing Day and this point now is our pressing, which I think is pretty non-existent at the moment. I think we do look to press and stop teams from playing out from the back, but it's almost like it's done in slow motion. Like you kind of see the strikers going to close down one of the defensive options, but then they'll have a clear pass to someone else who's not being pressed from anywhere else in the midfield, and then the ball will go to them, then the midfield will move, and then it'll kind of work further up the pitch. Which I do think our defence do a decent job of stopping that kind of final bit of play for the most part. Not kind of counting Cardiff a few weeks back, but it doesn't seem like if you look at the Forest game last season and how we forced, was it Yates at the time, into making that mistake, and that 25-yard shot back to his keeper. The pressing in that game was so good, and we don't see it anymore. And I feel like that's one of the main things. Like, teams generally have as much time as they want on the ball with us now, and it's just complete difference to what we saw last season.
I've just got my notes up here from that Forest game, and words like buzzing, outstanding from start to finish, so impressive. I likened it to the victory over Brighton under Aitor Karanka, and a lot of what's in these notes is about that pressing and kind of penning them back and just being really incisive with that press. I said it came in waves of 3, and Howson was pressing the distribution out from the back, which, as you said there, forced that own goal from Yates. But yeah, we don't really see that anymore. And also dominance on the ball. We had 62.7% possession in the first half against Forest, and then 54% overall. I've mentioned well-drilled, and something that you've mentioned, being well-drilled build-up patterns, nullifying their key players, limiting them to touches. We seem really far away from that now. It doesn't feel like we're well-drilled. It doesn't feel like our combination play is incisive. Our press, as you said there, is not there. It could be a personnel issue, and maybe not having the players to be able to introduce or reintroduce that press. But then we still got House in that team, who was fantastic that day in his pressing. It's just very bizarre, and it's a conundrum. I think one of the biggest words to describe this season so far is probably conundrum, because we've just been so far away from the goodness of this team that we knew and kind of became so accustomed to and comfortable with last season. But Ralph says, Boro finally have a vision, strategy and an attempted identity on the pitch after years of overspending and lurching from one approach to another. Do you think they will panic at the first sign of trouble and fan reaction, or do you believe they will hold their nerve and give Wilder this season to keep building regardless of league position? I've got a few points on this, and I've got a question back to this question, and that is, what is our vision? I'd love to hear that communicated by the club, because I think we can assume, and we've probably heard drips and drabs of things in the Gazette and whatever, but I would love to have full transparency of what this vision actually is, because yesterday after the game, there were a few quite vocal shouts of Wilder, get out, Wilder out, and lots of gesticulating at the players. I think the fans are starting to get a little bit restless of what they're seeing, and a lot of the time when the results don't come for a fan base, they will start to have those existential questions of, oh, is there something going wrong behind the scenes? Is there that matched up thinking or not? I kind of feel like, and I understand why Boro don't always come out and be openly transparent and communicate to the fans what their plans are, because sometimes quotes could be used as a stick to beat the club with. We want to smash the league, golden thread, and one that you mentioned earlier, Tom, marquee signing, I think is becoming this season's one. But I'd just love for Kieran Scott or somebody to come out and just tell us what the direction is, what the vision is, because I do feel like it's in the fans' interest to know. And as I mentioned earlier, if that is long-term success, then the jigsaw just isn't fitting, because I don't think Wilder is a long-term success sort of manager. He signed a 2-year contract. And fans will naturally expect, because of that and because of Wilder's success in the past, that we will get that short to mid-term success, short to mid-term promotion. And if that's just not what the vision is for Boro right now, and their immediate priority is to sort things out behind the scenes or to get this project building up, I would love to hear that. I would love, this is a club that put the Gazette, put the local paper in the naughty corner and effectively shut out 2 journalists because of a so-called lack of transparency. It would be great to just have them be really transparent and open with us. Don't ban me, Boro, but I would just love to hear something from them that just details what the plan is. It would be brilliant to hear that. And as fans, I do think that, you know, we should know about these things, but that's just me. I might be naive, but I'd love to hear it. But final question is from Matty. He says, how have we got the best manager in the league and still putting out performances like that?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, to be honest. You know, we've seen what Wilder can do with the team when he first came in and how he had the team playing. It was a complete difference to what we were seeing under Warnock in such a small space of time. So I don't understand what's gone wrong now, but I feel like there's clearly something not right. And I do think that the apparent disconnect from looking from the outside in on transfers may be something to do with it. I felt like that interview yesterday where he said Gyökeres is the best player in the league, I felt like that was a shot at recruitment. And that was before I'd even kind of read the, I think it was either the Gazette or the Echo this morning, where they went in, actually it was the Gazette, where they went into like further detail about it. And he was saying, oh yeah, there was interest during the summer and stuff like that. I think it was BBCT's where he'd mentioned Gyökeres being the best player in the league. And I don't know, there was a big difference between that and the club interview I found, which so I'd be interested to know which one was recorded first. But it did seem like there was a shot fired there, and there does seem to be a little bit of a disconnect in terms of the transfer strategy that we've had and the transfers that we've made this summer. So potentially that has something to do with it, but I'd just be speculating there. But yeah, I'd love to know why the apparent best manager in the league is still, you know, within the bottom 3 with this team.
Honestly, conundrum. It's just going back to the whole head-scratching nonsense that is Middlesbrough Football Club right now. But there is a quick turnaround because Boro host Birmingham on Wednesday night. And to get an insight on the Blues, we dialed in with the brilliant Gab Sutton.
I think we're happy with how the season's gone so far. To be 15th at this stage of the season, 11 games in, 3 wins, 4 draws and 4 defeats. I think that's a lot better than what a lot of fans had maybe feared before the season. I think if you talk to a lot of Blue Noses in July, it's funny, isn't it? There were Reading fans that were sort of quite bullish about their team, even though they'd just stayed up the year before. There wasn't that same bullishness in the Blues camp, and a lot of us were almost a little bit resigned to a season of struggle. But John Eustace has very quickly sort of galvanised the group. He's given us a bit of hope. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's done a lot to sort of bring the club and fans together in a way that certainly the board haven't done. So, a lot to take from that. I think in terms of the style of play, we're a 3-5-2 outfit. We're not particularly high press. I imagine we'll, with Troy Deeney and Scott Hogan, they'll be quite happy to let certainly the middle centre-back and the goalkeeper have the ball, and happy to sort of let them play it out to one of the wide centre-backs for yourselves. But at that point, it's they're going to probably try and... Well, firstly, they'll probably try and cut off the pass into Johnny Howson and maybe to Alex Moat. And then we'll probably look at maybe the wide midfielders like Bakuna and Chong to press the wide centre-backs when they get the ball and sort of cut off the passes into the wing-backs. But I think when we do press, it is quite measured, I suppose, because we want to try and sustain it, so it's quite intelligent. We know the distances between units, and it's all done with the idea of keeping those tight gaps between units and also protecting the back 3. which we've done for much of this season. So that's going to be the aim. I'd expect your lot to have probably more of the ball. And for us, it's going to be, can we counter-attack through Bakuna and Chong? They're probably the ones that are going to be really leading the breakaway. I was delighted to get to Heath Chong for on a 4-year contract from Manchester United. I think we did very well to get that. He was outstanding when he was fit last season. So I think he's probably going to be our danger man this afternoon. I'm a bit wary of a Middlesbrough reaction as well, because I know you a lot haven't had the season that you wanted so far. But at the same time, it's still Chris Wilder. It's still the team that so many people fancied to win for promotion, and I still have that feeling from the outside that, if Wilder can make one or two tweaks that make a big difference, then I could still see Middlesbrough putting a run together. Now, the point at which that run can start, and the point at which the number of points that Middlesbrough are going to need from that run is sort of increasing as the weeks go by, and I'm cautious of that. But I still see Middlesbrough as a threat, and a team to be respectful of, even though you've not had the results you're looking at so far. But yeah, really happy with how we've gone, how the season's gone so far, and ticking those points off nicely so far.
So I think Gab had us as first in his pre-season predictions. So thanks for that, Gab. Hopefully that actually comes true in the end. But galvanised Blues, counter-attacking team. I think they've got fantastic pace on the wings, ball carriers as well. Gab was saying there about John Eustace. He thinks he's a good coach. What are your predictions for this game, Tom? Tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling.
I'm dreading it. I think I'm going to go with like an optimistic 1-0, just to paper over the cracks for a few days so we lose against Millwall. But I always back us when we're at home. So I think I'll have to go for that. But I've got more doubt than I have done previously when we've been playing at home.
I feel like this game is always a night match, and it isn't, because we play them in the reverse fixture at 3:00. But I always feel like it is for some reason. I don't know why. And I always feel like it's going to be 0-0 because of that 1-0 that has plagued me ever since. In that game where I think David Nugent got sent off at the end for basically RKOing a player onto the pitch. But ever since that, I've just thought, Birmingham, Middlesbrough, always a night game, always 0-0. But anyway, I think for this one, I think we have to start fast. We have to start really well, really quickly, because otherwise I think tensions will get to the players. The Rotherham game and the Cardiff game especially. We know as Boro fans how vocal we are, not only in our praise but in our criticism as well. And if we don't start well, then we will let the players know. But for me, I think a 1-0 win, tight. It won't be convincing, but I think we'll get the job done. But the parting question for the week, our fixtures coming up. Obviously, we've got Birmingham on Wednesday, then we travel to Millwall, then we host Blackburn, then we go away to Wigan, and then we host Huddersfield. Tom, how many points are you expecting from those next 5 games?
Well, probably 5 at the moment, but like I say, I always try and like back us playing at home, so probably have to go 9. A loss against Millwall, and then probably a boring draw against Wigan, which would put us on 10. But like I say, I'm not convinced by us at the moment, so I think that's probably being too optimistic.
No, all power to you. Just keep being optimistic, and hopefully it'll manifest into some good results. For me, I've gone the same. I've gone 10 points I'm expecting. But Tom, how many points do you think we'll actually end up with?
Oh, God.
Be nice.
I'll go slightly higher than my initial one. I'll say 7. I reckon we win 2 of the home games and draw one of the games as well, and then lose the other 2.
Well, I've gone for, I think we'll end up with 8, and 8 points from 5 games is incredibly poor, so I hope I'm completely wrong with that. Listeners, let us know what you think as well for the next 5 games. Do pop a comment below in the YouTube comments or tweet us, messages on Facebook, etc., etc. But that's it for this week. Thanks, Tom, for joining me. This was the Boro Breakdown podcast. And what the hell is going on up the Boro Breakdown?